Ancient Greece is often described as the cradle of democracy, and we can all imagine what Socrates might have thought of it, given that he was condemned to death under the democratic regime in Athens. But what did Plato and Aristotle, the two most famous philosophers in the Socratic tradition, think about democracy? Plato and Aristotle were two of the most famous critics of democracy. In their writings, they really did not hold back their most fierce attacks against it. But let's take a closer look at what they actually wrote. For example, Plato in the Republic declares that democracy is a fundamentally violent regime. Like here, and democracy comes into power when the poor are the victorious, killing some and exiling some, and giving equal shares in the government to all the rest. Again, in his Republic, Plato complains about the features of democracy. For example here, the manner of life in such a state is that of democrats. There is freedom and plainness of speech, and every man does what is right in his own eyes, and has his own way of life. Ultimately, this boundless liberty is interpreted not as a virtue, but as a fatal flaw, leading to license. In fact, Plato's political theory mandates a strict, hierarchical order based on specialized functions, which will be in a few moments discussed. Aristotle went even further. In his Politics, he is very insistent that democracy is directed to the advantage of the indigent, regardless of the number of people in charge. For him, it was not about the many or the few, it was about poverty versus wealth. For the real difference between democracy and oligarchy is poverty and wealth. Wherever men rule by reason of their wealth, whether they be few or many, that is an oligarchy, and where the poor rule, that is a democracy. Aristotle rejects the definition by which oligarchy would represent the power of a minority and democracy the power of a majority, like we all would naturally think. It is in fact clear how oligarchy comes from the word oligos, meaning few or small in ancient Greek, and democracy from the word demos, meaning people. But again, Aristotle, in his Politics, makes this assumption. Suppose the whole population of a city to be 1,300, and that of these 1,000 are rich, and do not allow the remaining 300, who are poor but free, and in other respects they are equals, a share of the government. No one will say this is a democracy. In like manner, if the poor were few, and the masters of the rich, who outnumber them, no one would call such a government, in which the rich majority have no share of office, an oligarchy. Therefore, we should rather say that democracy is the form of government in which the free are rulers, and oligarchy in which the rich. It is only an accident that the free are the many, and the rich are the few. For this reason, in Aristotle's mind, a democracy is at the end a social construct more than a political one. It is crucial to note that in classical Athens, citizenship was restricted to adult males with Athenian parentage on both sides. This requirement excluded most of Athens' population. Firstly, women and foreign residents, known as metics, but similarly, also slaves, who made up a significant part of the population, had no political standing. But going back to Plato, his ideal city is ruled by the principle of specialization, which Plato introduces when constructing his ideal city in the Book 2 of the Republic. According to this principle, to each citizen is assigned a specific role, one that aligns with their abilities, and for which they have received training. In other words, the principle of specialization pertains to fulfilled nature. Each one should do the work for which he is naturally suited, in the sense of what the fulfilled nature is suited to, but selection into an educational program is determined by original nature. His ideal solution, therefore, is a philosophical aristocracy or monarchy, the rule of the best and the wisest. On this question, Aristotle, whose ideal was a broadly based oligarchy, took issue with Plato, using two main arguments. In the first place, he argues that for the many, of whom each individual is but an ordinary person, when they meet together, may very likely be better than the few good, if regarded not individually but collectively, just as a feast to which many contribute is better than a dinner provided out of a single purse. And also, for the same principle, he writes, hence, the many are better judges than a single man of music and poetry, for some understand one part and some other, and among them they understand the whole. This analogy suggests that when many individuals contribute, each possessing a fair share of decency and justice, their collective character and thought, when merged, can create a unified judgment better than that of any single expert. His second argument is rather more cogent. Politics, he suggests, is one of those arts in which the best judge is not the artist himself, but the user of the product. For example, the knowledge of the house is not limited to the builder only. The user, or in other words, the master of the house, will be even a better judge than the builder, just as a pilot will judge better of a rudder than the carpenter, and the guest will judge better of a feast than the cook. Governance is a practical art whose success is measured by the utility and benefits it provides to the citizens who live under its rules. While the multitude may lack the technical knowledge to legislate, they possess the superior capability to evaluate the outcome and hold rulers accountable. But why does Aristotle attack and then defend democracy against Plato? Is it an internal contradiction, or rather are we missing something? Aristotle, in his Politics, Book 3 and 4, identifies three correct forms of rule aimed at the common good: kingship, aristocracy, and politeia, and three corresponding deviant forms aimed at the ruler's self-interests: tyranny, oligarchy, and democracy. Critically, democracy is classified as the deviation or corruption of politeia. Politeia, on the other hand, is classified as a mixed constitution that blends features of democracy, like freedom and participation, and features of oligarchy, like wealth and merit. The seeming contradiction in Aristotle's assessments, simultaneously categorizing democracy as a deficient regime where the indigent cede power from themselves, while defending the collective judgment of the multitude, is the central challenge to understand his political theory. In his later work, The Laws, Plato moved away from the unattainable ideal of the philosopher king. Adopting a more pragmatic stance, he proposed a traditional polity or mixed constitution by blending aristocratic, oligarchic, and democratic elements. This adjustment was an acknowledgement that while philosophical truth remains the guiding light, stability in the real-world polis requires a tempered governmental structure. So eventually, even Plato comes to accept some elements of democracy, just like Aristotle did. And this brings us to the end of this video. You can find all the sources in the description below. If you liked the video and appreciated the effort to share all this information with you, I would be very grateful if you could subscribe to the channel. Also, feel free to leave a like and a comment. That will help me a lot to grow the channel and keep bringing you videos like this one. And thanks for watching. See you next time.